Welcome, everyone, to this week's Coffee with a Codex. My name is Dot Porter. I am a curator here in the Kislak Center for Special Collections, Rare Books and Manuscripts in the University of Pennsylvania Libraries. And if you've been here before, welcome back. Coffee with the Codex is our weekly manuscript show and tell, where I or someone else takes a book off our shelf and we show it and talk about it a little bit. Amy just is putting the links in again. So this week we are going to be looking at this little notary book, and I'm going to tell you more about that in a second. I want to draw your attention to next week, because I've been really looking forward to next week. Next week, Nick Herman, the Schoenberg Curator of Manuscripts, and Whitney Tratine, who is a professor in the English department, they're going to be looking at a new book that we've talked about a little bit before. It's our new woven book of hours. So this is literally a book that was woven on a loom in the late 19th century. There were a few copies made and we just bought one. And so we're going to have a look at that. And then, as always, in the next couple of weeks, there's going to be something, I'll be showing something else I don't remember. But next week is going to be, I think, really special. And so I hope you'll be able to make it. But today we are going to be looking at this little book here. The shelf mark is LJS 54. That means it's from the collection of Lawrence Schoenberg, which was gifted to us over the course of several years. This is a pretty neat little book. It was written in Padua between 1227 and 1237, we think, because of some dates that are in here, and I'll tell you a bit more about why there are dates in this book. This is a sort of a formulary or a notarial guide. It is basically a book that was compiled, we think, by a notary in Padua in the sort of early quarter, or I guess second quarter of the 13th century. And it starts out here with a sort of description of the work of a notary, what a notary does. I know very little about legal history in general, let alone in Italy or Padua during this time period. But my understanding is that a notary is the person who would write out legal documents and who had the authority to sort of sign them. And we actually will look at a couple. I pulled a couple out. We have a lot of them. I pulled a couple of our earliest ones, neither of which are exactly contemporary with this book. But both of them are from Italy, and they're both early examples of these sorts of documents. So what this book is it starts out, as I said, with this description of what a notary is. And then that's followed by several books that include example documents of different types of notarial documents that the notary would be expected to write. And they're divided into sections, and we'll go through and sort of look at each section. I have a list of them here. And it appears to be written by one hand up until the very end. And the notarial documents, I say they're example documents, but they're actually are real documents that were copied in here sort of as examples, as opposed to something like false examples that he made up. And one of the reasons that we think or know that this book was written in Padua is because some of the documents contain names of people who were known to live there during this time period. So they're real documents that they were written together, and how exactly this book was written is sort of an open question. Reading through the records that we have, that's in there's a little more detail than just what's in the record on Franklin, but it looks like it's possible that it was perhaps written over time. And so as he had documents, he kind of added them The numbering, the reason that this is a thing is because the numbering of the books as you go through, or the chapters, is kind of, some of them aren't numbered. So like we'll see when we go through, but like chapter 5 doesn't start, but it ends, and then chapter 6 begins. So whoever copied it out was sort of maybe not paying attention, or was doing, busy doing something else. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started and take a look. Let me switch back to the video in case you have any questions as we go. So here we have the introduction with this sort of nice opening initial. This is the fanciest page in this document that we're going to see. It is a little bit, it's small, it's not fancy. The parchment, I love the parchment because the parchment is very skin-like. You're going to see a lot of little holes and things like hair follicles, which I like. So the first book begins down here at the bottom, and you will know when new sections start because there's rubrication and you're going to get initials. However, the section labels within the chapters or the books are about the same as the book labels themselves and the initials that start them. So this is a section label with an initial. This is not actually the start of a new book or a new chapter. And so we go through, and here's another section, and here's another section. Lots of rubrication. It's pretty neatly written. The ruling has been done what we call in blind, which means it was not made in ink or pencil, but it was instead kind of pressed in, and we can see on the edges the prick marks, those little holes, and then at the very bottom there, I can see one line there. Pretty much, they're kind of hard to see, but in that case, you can see them. I see questions from Sue. What is the drawing on the upper left-hand corner? Oh, the upper right-hand corner of the first page. This is, it's a note. It's a word that's been written down the side. So if I turn it, you'll see here, and I don't know what that says. I don't know if it says. Let's take a look in the record. I am not sure. Decoration. It doesn't say what that word is. I don't know if it's a signature or what. Amy, do you have any idea what? Yeah, pro something. And I can't even tell if it's written at the same time as the main text or if it's a little bit later, maybe. Yeah, I don't know, but it's a word. It's just a word that's there. There are a couple of little drawings in here that we'll see too. There, but that's not the only like marginal note. We'll see. There's more. There's actually one over here on this side. There's another sort of thing. Whoever had this book was not afraid to sort of write on it. So we're still in the first book. The first two books are longer than the ones that come after. So this first book is on loans. So we start out with example documents. Here's how you write loan documents. And here are some examples. And let's see. I think it ends. One of the things, and I complain about this sometimes, it doesn't look like the folios are foliated. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the first book ends on 7 recto, I believe. No, 7 verso. There we go. Look, I can't see it. Here we go. So here we have our first explicit and begin. So we have explicit, liber, primum, the first book ends, and then incipit 2. So there's a number 2 there. And it looks very much, if we look on the next page, you know, it looks like the same kind of heading. It's not bigger. The initial isn't bigger. So you really have to be paying attention to the words of the header, or else you'll get confused. So here's some more. This page has quite a few notes written around it. Now this is book 2. This is on sale contracts. So one of the things that I like about this book is because it has this variety of different kinds of documents. It sort of shows you what was important legally and in business in Padua, probably Italy at the same time. So there's more notes written around here. These look later to me. This was written at one time, and then this one sort of written around the edge, written even later than that. So this is fun. Here we have a little dragon, something. Somebody later came through and added that in the margin. Clearly that wasn't original to it, but it's sort of fun. Let's see. Where we have our next 17 is where the next book ends. I love these little curly cues. It's not a fancy book at all, but the writing is clear and nice, and the large initials especially are pretty nicely written out. So here we have our next explicit and incipit. So this is the end of book 2 and the beginning of book 3. Book 2 and 3. Book 3 is on charters and safe conducts. So again, these example documents are all real documents that were copied into here as examples. And that's a short one because we're already ending explicit 3 over here and beginning 4. So 3 and 4. So whereas loans and sales contracts, there were many examples and those were quite long. This one, which was on exchanges, was only a couple of examples. So maybe that means that it was less, I don't know if less important is the right word, but there are certainly fewer sort of examples to be had. And I think the next one as well. A little shorter. So this is one of the examples where we have the chapter numbering is off. So we started chapter 4 and now we're ending chapter 5. So chapter 4 and 5 were sort of, I guess, not, or maybe chapter 5 was not labeled, but here it is. Chapter 5 and chapter 6. And I'm going to look at a different list because that one doesn't have the chapter numberings. Yeah. So this is on, the next section is on donations, I believe. Yes, on donations is where we start here. And as I go through, you can see that the parchment there are lots of little holes, some of which have been sewn up. There were a couple I saw where they've been sewn up, but mostly they've been left open. The parchment itself is pretty crunchy, all in all. And it's also the hair and the flesh is very distinctive. So the flesh side is much whiter or lighter colored than the hair side. And also the hair side, in a lot of instances, you can see up here, has very strong hair follicle patterning. So that the preparation hasn't, it hasn't been so carefully done that it really got rid of the hair follicles. All right. Linda has a question. Is this a copy or an original? Does the original author actually produce this? I think that was one of the questions that I saw sort of asked in the as part of this question of like the numbering of the chapters and how some of the chapter numberings are missed. That's one of the questions that raises. Is this, I think it's, it's clear that at some point somebody copied the original documents into a book form, and whether that was done in this book or if this was copied from another book, I think we don't really know. Although I will say that, this question of did the person put all the documents out and sort of write it all out, it looks to me, rather than having the book sort of be added to over time, it looks to me, and I'm not a paleographer, but it does look like the ink is consistent all the way through. It looks to me like this was sort of written out, not piecemeal, but it was sort of like, I'm going to write this book out, which could mean that the book was copied from another book. But it could also mean that the person was very well prepared and they had these example documents out and copied them as they went. And I don't know if Amy wants to add anything to that, but that's sort of how I feel about how it was probably done.
It does look like it was sort of written as part of one consistent effort. Mm-hmm. One thing that I wonder about, and like Dot, I don't have a lot of background in legal history, but whether a notary would have a copy of the things that he had given his authority to. And so if he had his own back files or his own rough copies, then he would have been able to assemble examples later in a way that would be useful for his future use. But I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, that it makes sense that they would, but like you, I don't know. So excuse me. So I think that's just something that we don't know. So here we have another book ending. This is the end of chapter 7 and the beginning of chapter 8. I'm not sure if I missed another one or if there just wasn't a label. So chapter 7 was on marriage. And the next chapter is business associations. So sort of interesting that you have marriage followed by business associations, because I think that was these two things would have been pretty closely related. So we have business associations here. So this is we're just talking about the ink. It looks like he started with some new ink here, because this is you're going sort of from a dark ink in the middle of a line to a much lighter colored ink, which it looks like that continues on. So I think this is going along with my idea that he probably wrote it out all at once. So the first thing we're going to look at is this little decoration down here. We've got a little bird. Clearly this was part of the plan. The bird is there and the text is being written around it. There are no other places where like all the initials are just written out in the margin. Oftentimes in manuscripts where you're expecting to see decorated initials, there's like a space left for it. And sometimes they don't get filled in. I think maybe last week we looked at something where it didn't get filled in. But this, I'm not actually sure why this is here, but I think it's fun that it is. So there's a little bird. And this is not a chapter break. This is not a move to a new book. This is just a new section here. The chapter break is up at the top here. So this is, we're ending chapter, that looks like 6 and 7, but I thought we were just at 7 and 8. Are they out of order? I'm confused now. And of course, because the pages aren't foliated. No, that looks like 7 and 8. And then that looks like 6 and 7. So I'm not sure what's happening. But anyway, new chapters. And then we have chapter 9 to 10 over here. And something that I've been noticing too, and again, it makes me wish I knew more about legal history. I'm seeing several instances of, we've got A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and it's rubricated a little bit, and it happens again down here. And I've seen that a few times already. I don't suppose there's anyone in the Word in here who knows what that might be. I just think it's interesting that the alphabet is sort of, or the first few letters of the alphabet are there. A placeholder for names, I don't know, could be. And I see that Anne has a question up at the top, and then Ellen, and then I'll answer your question. Anne is asking question on the contents of the text. What are some of the specific business dealings? Oh, so I've been sort of trying to say, so they're divided into sections by topics. So on wills, I think we're in the section that's on wills right now. It started out with loans. So there was a section on loans, and then sales contracts, exchanges, or like barter, like trading, not for money, but trading for material, on charters and safe conducts, donations, marriage, business associations, wills, guardianships and inventories, freedom and emancipation. So not only business, but also freedom and emancipation, which I suppose is like children or women being emancipated from their guardians, on agreements, on inheritance, confessions, evidence, and judgments. So those are the main topics. Ellen's question about rubrication, yes. So rubrication is from the Latin word for red. So it means rubrication is when you have writing that's in red. So these headings are rubricated. And sometimes you have individual letters. So when I was talking about the alphabet letters over here, maybe it's hard to see, but A, B, C, D, there's a little red lines in these letters. And you see them here. So that S also has a little red line. So we say they're rubricated because they have red ink sort of put through them, or this R up here. And it's just sort of a way to draw attention towards not only for decoration, but it also helps when you're reading. So if you have red in the first letters of a sentence, or if you have paragraph markings with red, it draws your eye, and so it helps you as you're reading through. All right, so it looks much like this. I'm going to skip to the end because there's a few things that happen in the end, because I do want to show you at least one of these other things that we have. So it gets messy towards the end. The last section is the last chapter is on confessions, evidence, and judgments. So it gets a little messier here. There's some different looking ink. So it looks a little bit more like somebody added. This looks like, to me, like it was written more piecemeal instead of sat down and added all at once. And there's also erasures. So there's parts where the things have been erased. If we look over here on this side of the page, it looks like there was writing down the side that's been erased. And at first I thought perhaps this was a palimpsest, which is reused parchment. So I thought, well, maybe this this had text written on it and then they erased it and reused it. But it looks like the writing is only on the margin. I don't see it underneath the text. So it looks like it's more likely somebody wrote something there and then erased it. And then if we look at the next page, this has clearly been something was written here and then erased. And then somebody much later has come through and made some kind of pen trials. Like they were just testing their pen or practicing a little bit of writing.
Is that one of the sewn repairs, Dot, that you were mentioning earlier in the left
Yes, over
side
on
page?
this side. Yep, over on this side, if you look here, there's a little hole and then there's a line above it. And that is where the wet skin was sewn together when they were making the parchment to hold that hole together. But then there are these other holes that they clearly didn't care about sewing them all, because there's these littler ones down here. So there's that. So we have a couple of more minutes. So I want to show you this. I'll show you this one. This is MS Call 764, what number is it? Number 16. And I'll show you this one because it's a roll, so it's sort of fun. I like to look at rolls. And also, so I'm going to turn this, let me see, turn this sideways. And we'll see the bottom. And Amy, when we were talking earlier, you said that one of the things that you liked about notarial documents is you get to see notaries had sort of signatures like symbols. And I don't know, I assume that's what these are. We get to the bottom of the document and it's sort of a way of signing. There's also more like a signature over here. But this is how you would know, like today we have a notarial. Yeah, exactly. Amy says it's sort of like the equivalent to a notary stamp. So like when I got my will redone, I had to go to the notary and like, you know, get it done. And so it's the same kind of thing. Each one would have their own way of signing, like a stamp. And in fact, I'm gonna roll this up. Rolls are fun. So you can see here, I'm rolling this, and here, because there's limited skin, they've sewn it, they've sewn these pieces together. So we'll see that up here, these signatures appear again. And I don't know why they do, because there's another, it might be that it's actually two documents sewn together, because there's another point further up where the skin is sewn together again, and there's no signature here. So I don't know. At first I thought that maybe the notary was saying these two pieces belong together, and so I'm putting my signature here, but now I'm not so sure. So this is a little bit later. This is, I think, 1308 is the dating of this. So this is written after, and it's not from Padua, but it is from Italy. It also has some things there. So this was parchment. After it's been in one place for a long time, it really wants to hold its shape. So it's desperate to stay all rolled up. I hope you can hear that. I hope you can hear me over that crunchy noise. All right, I'm going to finish rolling this up, and then are there any more questions before we say goodbye? This has been fun. I love showing books that I don't know anything about, because I always learn so much. And I hope that you all have enjoyed it as well. And I hope we'll see you again next week for that woven prayer book. It should be really fun. And thank you so much for being here today, and I will see you all later.